the disappearance of Cindy Anderson. If you've ever driven down Manhattan Boulevard in Toledo, you've probably passed Manhattan Plaza without giving it a second thought. People grab groceries, they pick up their lunch, they run a few errands, and they head home. But on one ordinary Tuesday morning, someone walked into Manhattan Plaza and never made it home. Her name was Cindy Anderson, and more than 45 years later, no one has ever found her.
This isn't just another missing person story, because 14 years after Cindy vanished from the shopping plaza at the law firm, a massive federal drug investigation unexpectedly brought her name back into the headlines. Federal agents searched a pond in Perrysburg. Witnesses took the stand in a federal courtroom. Prosecutors argued that they had uncovered evidence connecting Cindy's disappearance to a much larger criminal investigation. The defense challenged those claims. After weeks of testimony, the court still could not answer that one question Cindy's family had been asking since August 4th, 1981.
Where is Cindy Anderson? We're going back to where it began, and we'll walk through Cindy's final known morning, separate documented facts from decades of rumor, follow the investigation from 1981 through the federal case years later, and explain why, after months spent collecting original Toledo Blade articles, court records, historic maps, and public records, we believe Cindy's story deserves to be heard again, because somewhere, someone still knows what happened, and maybe together we can finally help bring Cindy home. So before the headlines, before the courtroom, before the theories, you need to meet Cindy.
I think that's something that gets lost in a lot of these true crime stories. People remember the mystery, but they really don't know who the person is. Cindy Anderson was 20 years old.
She lived with her parents, Mike and Margaret Anderson, in Bedford Township, just north of Toledo. They described Cindy as approximately 5 foot 4 inches tall, weighing around 115 pounds. That is 30 pounds less than me.
She was tiny. She was tiny.
The morning she disappeared, she was wearing a white dress with red trim, sandals, a gold watch, and a sapphire ring. And Sarah made a picture of this.
I did have AI recreate her outfit for us.
So within days, those details would appear on thousands of missing person flyers across Northwest Ohio. Friends described Cindy as quiet, kind, dependable, and deeply devoted to her Christian faith. Church wasn't just somewhere she went on Sundays. It was the center of her life. She was active in church and excited about the future. She had already given her notice at work because she planned to attend William Tyndale College with her boyfriend, Jeff Lemke. So everything in Cindy's life was pointing forward. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was planning a new chapter, and she never got that chance to begin it.
She wasn't someone who was struggling or trying to disappear.
Exactly. So friends and family all said the same thing. Disappearing voluntarily would have been completely out of character. There were no packed bags, no secret plans, no indication she intended to leave her family behind. No one imagined those final days at the office would become the last time they would ever see her. So Sarah, while researching this case, you actually discovered a couple personal connections.
I did find out at that time that I have a friend that's uncles with Jeff Lemke. And I also knew my neighbor. She was one of the friends and helped search for hers.
Aw, that's crazy.
Think about that for a second. This isn't ancient history. There are still people in our community who remember handing out flyers, walking fields, checking roads, praying for her, and hoping Cindy would come home. They've waited more than 40 years for answers. Maybe someone listening today remembers something they've never realized could matter.
So August 4th, 1981 was a Tuesday. It began like any other morning. Cindy left home and drove to her work at the law office of attorney Richard Neller on Manhattan Boulevard. She arrived around 8 a.m., unlocked the office, and began preparing for the day. A maintenance worker reported seeing her around 8:50 in the morning. Shortly afterwards, she made a quick trip to the Kroger next door, and employees there remembered seeing her. So witnesses later placed her near the office around 9:45 a.m. And it should have been another ordinary Tuesday. Instead, it became the last confirmed morning of Cindy Anderson, where the mystery begins. The phone calls to the office started going unanswered. Clients couldn't reach anyone. The office was locked. Inside, everything looked almost normal. The radio was still playing, the air conditioner was running, and paperwork remained neatly on Cindy's desk. Her white Chevy still parked outside. Investigators also noted something unusual. There was an odor inside the office described as something similar to nail polish remover. Whether it meant anything has never been publicly explained, even today. It's one of those small details that continues to raise questions, but Cindy, she was gone. And there were no obvious signs of violence, no broken furniture, no shattered windows, no evidence of a struggle. It looked as though someone had stepped away, fully expecting to come back. But Cindy never did.
Concern quickly turned into fear. Those that knew Cindy all said the same thing. This wasn't like her. She would not leave without telling someone. She wouldn't ignore her parents. She wouldn't walk away from the future she had been planning. When Cindy didn't return home, her family knew something was terribly wrong. Police were notified, friends gathered, church members began praying. Search efforts started almost immediately.
So I can't imagine what her parents were thinking that first night. The word hope appears over and over again in the original newspaper coverage. Hope that someone had seen her. Hope she'd walk through that door. Hope that every ringing phone might finally bring good news. Instead, the mystery just deepened.
So the next morning, Toledo woke up to headlines announcing that 20-year-old Cindy Anderson had disappeared. Within days, her photograph was everywhere. On bulletin boards, churches, store windows, telephone poles. Volunteers searched. Investigators interviewed witnesses. Rewards were offered. And one question echoed across Northwest Ohio. Where is Cindy Anderson? 45 years later, we're still asking that same question.
By the morning after Cindy disappeared, investigators had one enormous problem. They knew she was gone. They just didn't know what had happened.
And if Cindy disappeared today, investigators would immediately have things like pulling surveillance footage, tracking the cell phone, reviewing credit card activity, and locating vehicles through GPS. None of that existed in 1981. When Cindy Anderson disappeared, all investigators had were people, people's memories, people's observations, and the hope that someone noticed something unusual on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. Unfortunately, ordinary days are often the hardest to reconstruct.
Yeah. So let's go back. What do investigators actually know happened that morning? Small details that immediately caught investigators' attention. And one of them was Cindy's purse. So according to early newspaper accounts, investigators believed her purse was missing from the office. Other personal items associated with her daily routine also appeared to be gone, while her car remained parked where she had left it.
Investigators almost had two completely different pictures. One, that Cindy stepped out for a minute. The other, that something terrible happened.
Exactly. And that's what has made this case so frustrating. At first glance, it's almost like she voluntarily walked out. But the bigger picture never fit because Cindy didn't come back. She didn't call anyone. She didn't contact her parents. She didn't pick up her car. She simply disappeared.
And this isn't like her is the main thing I hear a lot through the original newspaper coverage. This isn't like Cindy. She was dependable, kind, faithful. Those who knew Cindy believed almost immediately something terrible had happened.
I can't imagine what Mike and Margaret Anderson experienced that first night. At first, you tell yourself there's a reasonable explanation. We're overreacting. Maybe she's helping someone. Maybe she forgot to call. But hour after hour, those explanations disappear. By the next morning, their daughter wasn't just late, she's missing. Their lives would never be the same. The Anderson family spoke openly with reporters, and they asked the public to help find Cindy. They refused to give up hope, even as days turned into weeks.
You can almost feel that hope slipping away. Could not imagine.
So the community responded immediately. Church members, friends, neighbors, complete strangers, everyone wanted to help. Flyers went up, volunteers searched, police followed leads, and media covered the story almost daily. And within days, a reward was offered for information leading to Cindy.
This wasn't just a police investigation anymore. It had become Toledo's search.
So at this point, did investigators have any suspects?
Not publicly. Investigators interviewed family, friends, co-workers, anyone who had seen Cindy that morning, anyone who might know something. But there was no eyewitnesses to an abduction, no physical evidence pointing in one direction, just questions, lots of questions. Over the years, people began wondering whether Cindy's disappearance could have somehow been connected to other violent crimes in Northwest Ohio. Some even speculated about the Cook brothers, because that was going on around that same time frame. Investigators explored countless theories, but no public evidence had ever established a connection.
So now we're on to harassing phone calls. So there's one detail investigators never completely dismissed. In the weeks leading up to Cindy's disappearance, she reportedly received disturbing phone calls at work. According to later accounts summarized by the Charlie Project, the calls frightened her enough that she mentioned them to people close to her. Investigators never publicly identified who made those calls. Well, probably because they didn't know.
But if those calls were connected, they're terrifying. If they weren't, still one more unanswered question, but we'll see as we go along.
Exactly. Could they be related? Possibly. Could they be coincidence? That's also possible. After all these years, no one really knows. As summer turned into fall, the searches continued. Tips came in, leads were investigated, but Cindy remained missing. For the Anderson family, life became divided into two parts, before August 4th and after. Even 1 year later, newspaper articles described a family still searching and still hoping, and even bringing in additional investigative help rather than just surrendering to the unknown. They wanted answers.
No one knew it then, but 14 years later, everything people thought they knew about Cindy's disappearance would suddenly be challenged. A federal drug investigation, a shocking new theory, a search of a Perrysburg pond, courtroom testimonies, and headlines that suggested investigators might finally have answers. But would those answers hold up? Or would they leave Cindy's family and all of Northwest Ohio with even more questions? The case takes a turn no one saw coming.
As the weeks turned into months, the search for Cindy Anderson slowly changed. Not because people stopped caring, because there was simply nothing left to search. No confirmed sightings, no ransom demands, no physical evidence, no body. Every lead seemed to end exactly where it began. Just with another question, no answers.
And life does go on, but not for everyone. I think people sometimes forget. Life keeps moving for everyone else, but for a family, it's like time freezes.
Exactly. Birthdays came and Christmas came, years have passed. But for Mike and Margaret Anderson, there was always one empty chair, one unanswered question. Every time the phone rang, they had hope that maybe this could finally be the call. Instead, the mystery just grew older.
So even after all those years, people still hadn't forgotten Cindy.
No. Local newspapers continued checking in on the Anderson family. Anniversary stories reminded readers that Cindy was still missing. Investigators continued accepting tips. The reward and hope remained. One article even described how the family hired additional investigative help because they simply just refused to stop looking.
Right. And sadly enough, the mom passed still searching for her daughter. So sad.
Yes.
So this wasn't just a Toledo story anymore, was it, Jess?
No. Eventually, Cindy's disappearance reached a national audience, and it was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, covered by the Charlie Project, revisited by local television stations, and was discussed by countless writers. Each new feature generated fresh tips, but no definitive answers. For a brief moment, there was renewed hope. Maybe someone somewhere would recognize Cindy's face. Maybe someone had been carrying a secret for years. Unfortunately, that breakthrough has never come.
But then everything changed. 14 years, as we had mentioned, after Cindy disappeared, her name suddenly exploded back into the headlines. Not because investigators had found her, not because someone confessed, because of something almost no one expected. A massive federal drug investigation.
How does a missing secretary become connected to a federal drug conspiracy?
In 1995, federal authorities announced sweeping indictments involving an alleged drug trafficking conspiracy centered in Northwest Ohio. During that investigations, prosecutors made a startling allegation. They alleged Cindy Anderson had been murdered because of what she may have known working inside attorney Richard Neller's law office. For the first time, the public was hearing investigators suggest Cindy's disappearance might not have been random at all. The indictment reignited interest in a case that many feared would never be solved.
Now, this is incredibly important. An indictment is not a conviction. This is true. It's not. It represents allegations prosecutors believe they can prove in court. The federal indictment brought Cindy's name back into the spotlight, but it did not mean anyone had been convicted for her murder. The distinction becomes very important later.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, Jess. It's easy to hear federal indictment and assume the mystery was solved, but it wasn't.
No, I can't imagine hearing that you've waited 14 years and suddenly prosecutors are saying they think they might know why she disappeared.
Exactly. Imagine being Cindy's parents. For years, nothing.
Mhm.
And then suddenly television cameras, newspaper headlines, federal agents, people talking about organized crime, people wondering if the mystery was finally about to be solved. Hope had returned.
And now enters the pond search. So not long after the indictment became public, investigators focused on a pond near the I-75 and I-475 interchange in Perrysburg. For 3 days, law enforcement searched. Divers entered the water. Heavy equipment was brought in, news crews gathered, and everyone wondered, was this finally where Cindy would be found? After 3 days, the search ended. Nothing connected to Cindy Anderson was recovered.
And that had to be so devastating, especially for her family.
Yeah.
Imagine the emotional roller coaster. For a few days, there was hope, painful hope. Then nothing. I'll mention something here because I think it's important. During my own research, someone shared a belief with me that the investigators may have searched the wrong pond. I have never been able to independently verify that claim, so I can't present it as fact, but it does show something interesting. Even decades later, people who have followed this case still question whether every possible lead was explored.
So, as the federal case moved towards trial, jurors heard testimony from numerous witnesses. Prosecutors argued that the broader drug conspiracy provided the motive behind Cindy's disappearance. The defense challenged those claims aggressively. Defense attorneys argued many government witnesses were cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences or other benefits, which did happen a lot, and in ways that did not make a lot of sense. They referred to several of them as snitches. Prosecutors responded that organized criminal conspiracies are often proven through insider testimony. Jurors were left to decide who they believed.
I will also mention, obviously, if you want to go search the Blade, go do it. You can search between 81 and then back in 96, and you'll find a lot of this stuff. There was a lot of threatening of those that were trying to come forward. And I feel like this is a scary family. Richard Neller was a part of this, but up in Michigan, they were doing robberies as well. I could imagine that's very possible that Cindy heard something she wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, very true. When you work for an attorney, I'm sure there's a lot that you hear.
Jose, who is the party being questioned with Neller, he was his attorney. I don't know if they made that clear in here too. They were like buddies, and Neller was Jose Rodriguez's attorney.
Yeah, so this attorney was definitely a shady character.
Also owned La Prensa. He was always really known in the Hispanic community. He's dead now, so we can't talk to him. But I found it odd that when we researched this the first time, I found out I was friends with Rico Neller on my Facebook. Did anyone actually get convicted of Cindy's murder?
No, they didn't. So Richard Neller was convicted on certain federal conspiracy-related charges. Jose Rodriguez Jr. was convicted on drug conspiracy charges, but neither man was convicted of murdering Cindy Anderson. So when sentencing took place, Judge John Potter made an important ruling. He concluded the evidence presented during the trial was not sufficiently reliable to find Cindy Anderson had been abducted or murdered by the defendants for sentencing purposes. So the ruling didn't explain what happened to Cindy. It didn't prove the allegations were false. It simply meant the evidence presented did not meet the legal standard required to increase a sentence based on Cindy's presumed murder.
So where did that leave the case? After 14 years, after all the indictments, after the pawn search, after the trial, people still don't know what happened.
That's right. The federal case answered some questions about criminal activity, but it didn't answer the one question Cindy's family had been asking since August 4th, 1981. Where is Cindy Anderson? Who is responsible? Some theories didn't make sense, and some details had been repeated so many times. People accepted them as fact without ever going back to the original reporting. So you wanted to start over, not with internet rumors and not with decades of speculation, but with the original documents, the original maps, the original newspaper articles, and one simple question. What, if anything, had everyone missed?
I'll take you through the research that changed the way I looked at Cindy Anderson's disappearance and why I believe this case still deserves another look.
The search continues.
When I first started researching Cindy Anderson, I thought I was going to spend a weekend reading about an old missing person case. That weekend turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. Before I knew it, my computer was filled with original newspaper articles, court records, historic maps, property records, and pages of notes. Every document seemed to answer one question while creating three more. I wasn't trying to prove a theory. I was trying to understand how a 20-year-old woman could disappear from a busy shopping plaza in the middle of a weekday morning and still not have answers more than 45 years later.
So going back to the original sources, one thing I noticed while helping you with this is you weren't relying on YouTube videos. You kept saying, I want the original articles.
Exactly. The stories change over time. Details go repeated incorrectly. Rumors slowly become accepted as fact. So I wanted to go back to the beginning. I looked up every kind of word or association that could have brought up articles regarding Cindy. They did call her Cynthia. They called her Cindy. And then sometimes they don't use the last name. So the way you have to search it did make it
a story that never left Toledo. The more we worked on this, the more it felt like everyone had some connection to Cindy.
Nearly everyone I talked to either remembered hearing about her or knew someone who did, or they knew the attorney. One of my neighbors attended church with Cindy. She remembered helping search for her, and that really stayed with me because it reminded me these were like real people, real times.
Yeah, and people are still alive that were part of this.
And may know something. the simplest thing could come out. I just want to know, don't you? And that was what was odd, is the person I know that was a close friend said, do not bring this back up. But every article, Cindy's mother, all she wanted was her daughter to come home.
Yeah.
So why are other people telling me to be quiet when everything shows me that they want to bring this closed? And it's been 45 years and the mom and dad are past now.
A lot of times these cases, come to the forefront because with time, people are more apt to come forward because it doesn't affect people.
People are passed away that they were threatened by. And one thing is, there is still one person in this story that is alive that probably has the answers. We'll probably never give them to us. He just got out of jail.
I feel like it was like
It was this year.
He had known her because that was his attorney and she was always in the office. So, I mean, it's not to say that he doesn't have information. He probably does know some things. What if he's not involved? What if he just knows what happened? I mean, that could be too.
Right. My theory is maybe she heard something and they had to get rid of her.
I believe I read somewhere that the family said if she knew something, she would say something because that was her personality.
That's the other thing. Is she in a pond? I really, truly do believe she was in Perrysburg. There's a house in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
It was land, right?
Okay.
In 81, 82, the house was built. Could something have happened in that construction time on that property?
That's how a lot of people back then got rid of people.
That house is no longer owned in the family, but it was a known house of events, families, parties, activities, and it was just for rent last year. I wanted to go see it, but I didn't. We need to bring this case back to life. I really think we can find Cindy. A lot's changed since 81, especially in Perrysburg. That was like farmland, and now there's a lot more established. So I'm sure a lot of the ponds there now weren't there in 81. So
that's very true. So
even after all those months, I keep coming back to the same questions. What happened after she returned from Kroger? Did she leave the office voluntarily? Was she lured away? Or did something entirely different happen? The truth is, we don't know. And I think it's important to say we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There are still facts that remain unknown.
Sometimes the hardest words in investigations are simply, I don't know.
And that's where it's important to separate documented facts from assumptions. I do have a lot of my opinions in here.
We all have opinions. Not everyone likes them. As we see daily. Some people might wonder, why spend so much time on a case that's more than 40 years old?
And you know what I say? It's because missing people don't have expiration dates. Families don't stop wondering. Parents don't stop loving their children because decades pass. Cindy's family spent years speaking with reporters. They were very open in helping and trying to find her, asking the public not to forget their daughter. Even after the initial searches ended, they continued hoping someone would come forward with the piece of information that could finally explain what happened. If there's one thing that this investigation taught me, it's that real life isn't like television. Most cases don't end with a dramatic confession or a hidden videotape.
Damn.
Or a detective standing behind a podium saying, "We solved it." Sometimes the ending is simply waiting for someone to remember, waiting for someone to finally decide to talk, waiting for one missing piece. If someone listening today knows something, even something that seems small, this story is for you. Maybe someone told you something that you never realized mattered.
And
maybe you've carried a secret because you were afraid or because you thought too much time had passed. It hasn't. One truthful memory could still matter. One conversation could still matter. One phone call could still matter. Did you work at Kroger's on Manhattan back in 81? If you think you know anything.
So after everything we've talked about today, I think it's easy to forget that there was a real person behind this mystery.
Before there were headlines, before there were theories, before there were courtrooms, there was Cindy, a daughter, a girlfriend, a friend, a young woman devoted to her faith, looking forward to planning her future, someone whose family fully expected to see her walk through that front door that evening. Instead, they spent that next 45 years wondering why she never did. Her mother, Margaret Anderson, passed, never knowing what happened to her daughter, and that's heartbreaking.
So, what do you hope people take away from this?
I hope they remember Cindy. I hope they understand the difference between documented facts, rumors, and unanswered questions. The episode wasn't created to accuse anyone. It was created because one young woman's story deserves to be remembered, and because her family deserves answers. If you have information about the disappearance of Cindy Anderson, no matter how insignificant it may be, please contact the appropriate law enforcement agency. Even with all these years, investigators have said they continue to welcome credible information.
So, Mike and Margaret Anderson never stopped hoping. Neither should we. So, for Cindy and for every family still waiting for answers,
let's find Cindy. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Talking Trash and Tacos. If Cindy's story moved you, please share it, because sometimes the smallest forgotten detail is the one that finally brings someone home. I'm Sarah.
I'm Jess.